So it's rare to see a Kamen Rider series get brought to the Western world officially. I mean, you had Saban's Mask Rider, which was Mask Rider the First, which was also pretty Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, which didn't do so well. And I think that might be it out of the 20 plus series out there in Japan. But Windsor, my friend who happens to be a tokusatsu fanatic, badgered me to check out Kamen Rider Amazons, or Amazon Riders as it's called here on the Amazon Prime service. And it has been years since I've talked about a tokusatsu show on this channel, so why the hell not? There's only one season out so far and it's only 13 episodes, so let's give it a go. Also, a little bit of a warning. Please, for the love of God, do not, and I mean this, do not play a drinking game every time I say Amazon. I'm going to say it a lot in this review. Alright, let's begin. Kamen Rider Amazons, aka Amazon Riders, is an Amazon Prime exclusive tokusatsu series from 2016 that's loosely based off of the controversial Showa-era Kamen Rider Amazon. Why was that controversial, some of you might be asking? Because the hero of that series would always kill his opponents by dismembering them or cutting them until they gush blood out of their wounds, as opposed to the traditional explosion like any other Rider series. So of course it would make sense to have a more adult-themed Kamen Rider show be inspired by Amazon. The story is that 2 years prior to the first season, an accident occurred at Nozama Pharmaceuticals where approximately 4,000 Amazons have been unleashed in Japan. You see, Amazons in this series are creatures with human forms that are composed of Amazon cells which like to feast on protein. Eventually, the armbands that they wear to repress their hunger would wear off and then turn them into a big giant monster and they will start devouring humans. Reika Mizusawa, chief officer in Nozama's Special Research and Development HQ, constructed a small task force, basically a SWAT team meets Orkin, to exterminate these Amazons before they could do any more harm to humans. And we also have another protagonist, Jin Takayama, a special type of Amazon known as Kamen Rider Amazon Alpha, who acts independently but also has the same desire to kill all Amazons in Japan. And finally, we have Mizusawa's son Haruka, who spent most of his life in his room until one day when he decided not to take his medicine, it caused his Amazon cells to react and he awakens and becomes Kamen Rider Amazon Omega. We have two different Kamen Riders as well as a task force, so it's almost like three different set of protagonists. I know the two Amazons are the major focus, but I think the extermination team also deserves some credit here, because they're actually, well, some of them are actually the more likable characters compared to the other two Amazon characters. See, here's the thing. This series has a lot of moral gray area. We do get a lot of focus on Haruka, Amazon Omega, but the truth is, he was kind of hard to root for, especially at the end of the series, because his whole deal is that being an Amazon himself, he wishes to protect other Amazons that have yet to commit any atrocities. But the problem is, as I said before describing the plot, it's only a matter of time before that happens. Hell, he even gets called out on it like once or twice, and the worst case scenario would immediately play out afterwards. So we could narrow it down to Jin Takayama, Amazon Alpha, because he fights to protect humans. But he did this one particular thing, again I can't go into details for spoilers, that made me hard for him to root for him as well. Let's just say he protected a human that didn't deserve any protection at all. At least we have the extermination team, also known as the Nozama Pestin Service, and I did grow to like them more and more as the series progressed. Their reason for doing it was just to earn money, and that would be something that might piss people off, but then again, Geralt of Rivia from the Witcher series also slays monsters for similar reasons, and he's like one of my favorite fictional characters, so I didn't mind that at all. And the character I can agree and relate to most is their leader, Shido. Pretty cool dude, level-headed, his logic is always pretty sound. Oh yeah, the extermination team also has an Amazon on their own, Mamoru. He's not a Kamen Rider, but he is an Amazon monster. He's like this big mole man type of creature. I didn't really care for him all that much. He was too much of a man-child for me. I didn't like that. But other than that, the story and premise is very interesting because it's Kamen Rider with bits and pieces of Resident Evil with it, with all these monsters that are just killing humans and stuff. And the action is, while cheesy, still pretty entertaining to watch. We'll get into details later when I go through this review, but I'm going to talk about the designs of the Amazons. Costumes for both Kamen Rider Amazons are great, but I actually prefer Alphas more because the red and silver are just really great colors combined with little shades of green. And the shape of his costume, his helmet especially, looks more like the Showa era Amazon. And Omega has the color scheme that does lean in more with that classic design, but the helmet feels a little more traditional Kamen Rider, which is crazy because when Omega fights, he acts more beastly and most of his dialogue in henshin form is just growls, as opposed to Jin's style of just fighting, being all cool and calm and shit. And as for the other Amazons, aka the Monster of the Week types, most of them look and act like bugs, and that's what the extermination team calls them most of the time, bugs, in order to differentiate from the other Amazons. Now let's talk about special effects because that's a tokusatsu show as well as the cinematography and stuff. Now, I guess this is trying to push a darker, grittier Kamen Rider series, but Amazon Riders would have a muted color scheme similar to the Man of Steel, where colors don't pop out. Outside, it always looks like there's an overcast and it could rain any second. But at least the red and green Amazon costumes do stick out in that color, in that muted color scheme. Now, CG has become a staple for these shows, and even if it looks like something out of a sci-fi direct-to-TV special, it doesn't really bother me. I'm not expecting Hollywood-esque productions. It's to be expected, but did most of the blood spurts also had to be CG? Really? I mean, there's still practical blood effects here and there, but it's not in the place where I think would matter most, is whenever the Amazon Riders do their finishing strike on their opponents, also known as a violent punish, as their belts would say. There's still some fighting going on, and that's still pretty good. It's mostly wire fu, where Amazons would jump high or throw each other pretty far. Now, the Alpha and Omega Riders, they don't have any array of gadgets that they could sell as toys to kids. The most they have is like a weapon on their belts that can either be a spear, a whip, or a scythe, and they don't use it a whole lot, and that's about it. But the fights themselves are still fun to watch because they feel more raw and unpredictable than completely choreographed. There's a whole lot of throwdowns, some grabbing, fighting in small spaces like an apartment building or a restaurant. And I love those types of fights in my violent shows, that's for sure. Kamen Rider Amazons doesn't have an opening theme song, well, at least not for the streaming version. I believe there's one in the Japanese broadcast version, but it's actually the same as the credits song. But the credits song, it's really a good play because it would always play at like the most insane of times that would set up for the following episode, which is appropriate for a streaming service that probably wants you to binge watch their shows in a weekend's time. So overall, despite most of my criticisms involving the characters and the CGI blood, I still enjoyed my watch of Kamen Rider Amazons. It's got good action in every episode, the writers themselves still look cool, it's pretty gritty, and I'm hoping the second season and the movie also comes out pretty soon on Prime. I'd still recommend giving this show a watch if you have the opportunity. Each episode, well, they start, they're between 30 to 40 minutes, but as the series progresses, they sit on the solid 30-minute mark. But if you think this is a show you should have your kid watch, I did mention there is blood and acts of cannibalism, right? Well, that's my Toku Talk review for the week. My next review will be an anime review of one of those 3 promises I tried to keep several years ago, so stay tuned for that, and this is Darkscream signing out.